How's it going, ladies and Bruce's up? I'm Sixkilla. Welcome back to Choices That Matter, and the sun went out. Miss Farah is dead. Petrus is dead, murdered by Dagger, and we got Moti back, who apparently was taken by Dagger as well. I think. I don't know, but she's gotten away anyway. So Moti wants to kill Dagger. You can't do that, Moti. You got no hands. I assure you, teacher, there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's the same. It applies in this case. I shook my head and didn't respond. Moti seemed different. Wandering outside, I found Dolores, Sharon, and Vardik in the garage in a hushed conversation. Mate, Sharon started towards me and I held out my hand to stop her. Here, call Chrissy. I pulled Moti off my wrist and handed it over to her. She beamed at me and discreetly left the large building. Who's Chrissy? Vardik asked, brows furrowed. Another contact. Dolores slid in smoothly before turning to me. I called Sharon back after what happened. None of us should be searching alone. Or, she said before Vardik could comment, without another group. Another of our group, to be exact. Truth in that, I nodded. Have you attempted to contact Dagger? Crank? Neither are reachable, but that doesn't mean that Crank is involved, she cautioned. The signal's still worthless when making calls. They're working together, of course they are. Dolores narrowed her eyes but nodded. I should have listened to your concerns earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't. I apologize. Apologize to fucking Petrus, lady. I blinked at her. I never heard her admit that she was wrong before. On closer examination, I realized she looked haggard and worn. Tired. When did you last sleep? I asked, as kindly as I could. I'm fine, she sniffed. Back to business. We need that intel from the Russian space program. I frowned. Crank told us he sent instructions to abandon that. Another lie, she murmured, rubbing her forehead. Don't matter. We're all on the same page now. Surely Dagger and Crank take precedence, I argued. Who knows what information they could sell to the highest bidder? Don't think I haven't thought of that already, she warned, wagging a finger at me. I'm clearing the house out and moving the jet as soon as you're all finished with your assignments. It'll fly now? Was it Dagger who disabled it? That was me, teacher. Sharon returned, handing Moti to me, a serene expression on her face. It was safe to say that Chrissy was okay, wherever she was. Miss Dagger planned to take the craft back to the company and abandon you all here. I couldn't allow that, so I messed with the electronics. Moti gives new meaning to the term smartwatch, Sharon smiled. We can't let them escape. Finding Dagger and Crank is top priority, Dolores. I agree with teacher. This is personal. Speaking of, I muttered to Sharon. Satine, how's she? The hospital said she's going to pull through, but they want to keep her overnight just in case. Farah? Dolores asked, eyes bright. This is the first she was hearing of it. Dead, I said after a pause. We've lost 2 friends in the space of a day. Maybe more if we can't contact China. We can't think about that, Dolores shook her head. They can look after themselves. Like we can? Seriously, I'm not infiltrating a Russian government building without knowing where Dagger is. Too many things can go wrong. Dolores took a deep breath and nodded. She started counting on her fingers, though she didn't say what she was counting. After a moment, Dolores looked at Vardik. You, Mr. Second Best Hacker, she said, poking him in the chest. You're going to pull this information while these two find our saboteur. Why, he grunted, not pleased that he'd been singled out. I'll pay you, with interest. Deal. They shook on it and Sharon rolled her eyes. Teacher, I've reached Mr. Etienne for you. He's waiting to speak to you. Just pick up the phone. I took a few hasty steps away from the group and picked up my phone, eager to hear my friend's voice. Tintin, I asked, speaking into the receiver. It's good to finally talk to you, friend, he sighed heavily. These gadgets aren't worth the price tag on them. I laughed, agreeing. Communication wasn't as simple as it used to be. How are things going on your end in China, I asked, leaning against a wall. Oh, bloody slow, he muttered. The military has the whole city shut down tight. Any kind of sneaking isn't doing us any good, so we've not made any progress. You? In a split decision, I decided not to tell him about Farah or Petrus. He was half a world away and it wasn't fair to burden him. We have the recording, in the process of verifying it now, I told him, looking back to the small group of 3 behind me. What does it say, he asked, eager. That everything we know is wrong, basically, I sighed. I wish I could tell you more than that, but that's all we've got. Listen, if Dagger or Crank contacts you, believe nothing they say. We've been betrayed. Oh no, Etienne droned sarcastically. Who could have predicted that? It's not funny, Etienne, they're dangerous. Okay, he replied seriously. I'll tell everyone to watch their back. Are you alright? Yeah, it's just been a couple of long days. I hear that. With a heavy sigh, I closed my eyes and rested my head back against the wall. So you've not figured out much in China, huh? I guess Satine won that bet with Chase. You're not wrong there. But there's something else we kind of connected the dots on, he said excitedly. Oh? You know the Aetherites and Children of Gaia. They've got the same origin. Same beginnings. They hate each other, I frowned. Siblings usually do, he laughed. Remember that symbol I found in Dad's diary? Get this. Turns out it originated in the 14th century. The same century both their groups were apparently founded. And then they got into an argument about my dad's explanation of the physical, non-physical dimensions and how it changes everything for them both. We're still trying to get them to calm down and explain it to the rest of us, but it's pretty astounding, no? At this point, everything helps. I sighed. Goodbye, Mr. Etienne. Teacher must go now. Then the line died. Moti, what just happened? I asked with an annoyance in my voice. I finally got to contact with Etienne, and Moti just stopped the call. I have located Mr. Crank's cell phone, teacher. I'd like to go and kill them now. If you would please. I was a little uncomfortable with how Moti used the word kill so easily now. Well, he's been hanging out with Dagger, right? But I brushed it off. It was just an expression. Moti didn't mean it. Are you sure about that? Moti, you need to consult me when doing things. Why, teacher? Things are much more efficient when I do them. It just makes logical sense. Oh my god. We're going into a Skynet era. Well, they aren't always the right choices, Moti, I explained. Was I wrong to track Dagger? No, but then I don't understand your point. I rushed back to the others just as Vardik was leaving. Don't worry, I'll get what you need, he scoffed at Dolores before taking my arm tightly in his grip. You look after my Sharon. Pretty sure she can look after herself, I muttered, earning myself a grin from Sharon. I waited until Vardik was out of earshot before continuing. Moti's tracking Dagger's location. How? Dolores asked, tilting her head on her side. When I was in close proximity to Miss Dagger, I paired with her phone. I simply had to wait for her phone to connect to the internet and triangulate from the linked cell towers. I planned ahead. It seems you did, Dolores drawled. Alright, you two take care of this. Take care in what way? I asked acidly. She knew I was against killing others. In whatever way you see fit, she countered. As long as the problem is dealt with, I have no further opinion on the matter. She struggled away, but once the tension in her shoulders she strutted away at once, but the tension in her shoulders told a different story. The betrayal of Dagger and Crank had stung her deeply. Let's go, Sharon muttered. Sorry, I couldn't English there for a minute. Not that I ever can, really. Glad to have you with me. Pick your favourite car and let's go. I can pick anyone, really? She asked, looking around at the expensive vehicles. And if you do it fast, I muttered, amused at how pleased Sharon was. Right, yes, we'll take this one. She snatched a set of keys and held them high. Miss Dagger's on the move, teacher. It's time we are too. Agreed. It took most of the afternoon to get close to Dagger without her seeing us. Not only had she kept on the move, but Crank was often waiting in the car, not allowing us to approach them. We should just rush them, Sharon suggested, eager for action. They're better trained than either of us. I shook my head. What, you think the element of surprise is in our favour? They know we're coming for them. Fair call, she sighed, sinking down into her seat. Eventually, around dinner time, Crank got out of the car with Dagger, and they had an argument. I couldn't hear the words, but from the gestures, Crank wanted to go in, and Dagger wanted him to wait in the car. It's a restaurant, Sharon murmured, looking at the building they were in front of. He's hungry. Typical man. You speak Russian? I asked, surprised. No, I'm not sure why. I already knew she was bilingual. I picked up a few things, she shrugged. How do you want to play this? Dagger and Crank both walked inside. Dagger not at all pleased. I opened my door and stepped out. We put a bomb under her car. Wait in the car, I might need a quick getaway. She swore like a sailor, but stayed in the car and shut the door. We'd been parked far enough away that we didn't raise suspicion. I crossed the street, turning to make sure Sharon still had my back. I was relieved when I saw, as I'd hoped, the restaurant was set up with a partition between the entrance and those seated. Doubly relieved when I also saw there were separate meals and bar section. I smiled at the host to let him know that we were interested in the bar side. He stared at me, confused. Moti suddenly spoke in Russian, and the man laughed, nodding, and leading me to a seat at the bar. What'd you say? I asked, looking over my shoulder for any sign of Dagger or Crank. That my owner doesn't speak Russian but needs a drink. I ordered a beer, grateful to have something in my hands to stop them from fidgeting. Moti, we have to talk about your acting without permission. I know you think it's fine, but I'm your teacher, and I'm telling you it's not. I don't think this is the time to chat, teacher. Mr. Crank is heading to the back of the restaurant where the toilets are. We should ambush him. I turned around and nodded to Moti, indicating that I'd seen him. Perhaps a better plan is to sit at Dagger's table. We get a better chance if they're divided. I thought it over. Ambush, Crank. I got up from the bar and snuck toward the hallway leading to the toilets. I glanced back several times, but Dagger never noticed me creeping away. Or maybe she did and she was biding her time. I'll have to see. Pressing my ear to the door, I listened carefully at the men's bathroom, but I couldn't hear anything. Taking a deep breath, I hoped that Crank was the only one who was in there, and opened the door. He was standing at the sink washing his hands. I raised my taser and pointed it at his back, while he looked up and saw me in the mirror. Alright, that's a bit strong, isn't it? He scoffed. Montague said to stay in the car and keep watch, but screw her, I'm hungry. I need dinner. Petrus is dead, I said, enraged that he would play coy. Miss Dagger killed him. Crank laughed, turning around so he could see me properly. Then his face fell. You're not kidding, he stated. I wouldn't kid about that, I snarled. You and Dagger were going to take the jet, sell Moti back to the company and abandon us all here. Anger transformed Crank's face into something dark. You've been running errands for Montague all freaking day. Do this, do that. Well, you know what? Screw you too. I hesitated. Could Dagger really be in this on her own? Behind me, the door swung open and Dagger entered the bathroom, danger in her eyes. Taser, Dagger. I pulled the trigger and Dagger convulsed for several moments before slumping to the floor. I quickly grabbed her leg and pulled her into the bathroom, trying to avoid a scene. Before I could turn to confront Crank, I felt something cold press against the back of my neck. A knife. You better have a good reason for doing that, weasel, Crank growled, moving to stand in front of me, still holding the blade to my neck. Like I've already said, I sneered, keeping incredibly still. The two of you betrayed us all. And how exactly did we do that, he retorted, voice dangerously low. Miss Dagger stole me. She intended to sell me to the company, sell me and the information about Miss Montague and everyone else to the company. She wanted to steal the jet. Crank's eyes zeroed in on Moti and raised an eyebrow. I find no reason to believe you, he growled, his jaw tightening. Dagger is loyal to Montague. Call Dolores, I muttered, holding out my phone to him. See what she says. He stared at the phone, hesitating. Wait for his decision. The next few moments were tense, but slowly Crank took my phone and dialed the number. He knew it by heart. Crank held the phone to his ear and narrowed his eyes at me. Tell your friend to join us, he hissed, waiting as it rang. I'll let Miss Sharon know. Thank you, Moti, I murmured, not thankful at all. I heard Dolores pick up a greeting and jump right into orders before Crank cut her off. Montague, what's happening? He asked. Not taking his eyes from me as Sharon joined us to stand beside me. He had Dagger and me run errands all day. He listened. The pause was longer than I thought was necessary before nodding and lowering his knife. I see. Do you want us to follow her? He asked. The tone in his voice strangely tight. Alright, we'll see you soon. He hung up and handed me back my phone. We're heading for the new location Dolores has set up, he told us, not looking either of us in the eye. Miss Dagger is still an issue, Mr. Crank. I'd like to find and hurt her. Well, we'll get to that after we've reconnected with Montague, he said stiffly, moving to leave. Once we're all in the car again, Dagger in the trunk and Sharon driving, I gave Crank a critical look. How do I know I can trust you? He turned to face me in the back seat. You can never know something like that, he said honestly. I trusted Dagger and it looks like I was wrong. She wanted to get you out too, I think, I admitted. Get you back in the company's good books. Maybe so, he shrugged. But I have very few rules in my book, and loyalty is one of them. Dagger betrayed that loyalty, and now I can't trust her. I gotta say, Crank, Sharon muttered, I didn't take you for the smart one of the two. Gilbert. What? My legal name is Gilbert, he muttered, looking out the window. Crank seemed more fitting, but... There's no Crank without Dagger, I concluded. He nodded. I sat back and gave him his space. He'd had a rough day. Dolores' new hideout seemed to be a privately owned airstrip. Older style Spitfires were littered around a nearby field, and I wondered idly if any of them worked. We parked next to the jet and Dolores came out to meet us. She's in the trunk, I said right away. She nodded and handed Gilbert a set of cuffs. Secure her over there, she said, pointing to the shadow of one of the largest Spitfires. He nodded and set to work. I need more than my own two eyes here. she said to Sharon. And me. This place is too large and has too many entrances. I'm glad Crank is still with us. What are you going to do with her? Heaving a deep breath, she rubbed her neck. I'll take care of it, she said finally. She's my mistake. I'll fix it. I didn't argue with her. I'd rather not know, honestly. First priority for you two now is to head to the hospital, Dolores said, shaking her uncharacteristically melancholic mood. Hospital? I asked, confused. What information is there? Satine, she scoffed, rolling her eyes at me. She's there. Right, Sharon muttered. She might not be safe after all this. Are any of us safe, really? I sighed, rubbing my eyes. The sun's going to go out again, and soon. We have information, but we don't know what it means. Baby steps, Dolores firmly said. Now I need you to leave your motorcon here with me. Sharon and I both raised our eyebrows, stunned. I just got Moti back. Why do you need Moti? If I may, teacher, I'd be more useful here with Miss Montague. I can help you secure this area and gather information while you pick up Miss Satine. Why do I feel like that picking Satine up won't be as simple as it sounds? I muttered, uncomfortable. Sharon shifted beside me, narrowing her eyes at Dolores. We should trust you, Sharon stated, chewing on her words, but you've been pretty secretive. You need to give us something more. I'm not as young as I was, Dolores burst out suddenly. I can't hold down this position by myself. That's why I asked you to come back. I can connect Moti to the surveillance system. I said nothing, resisting. I've been without Moti for so long already. Fine, Dolores muttered. It's your choice. Either you leave Moti with me, or Sharon stays behind. As long as one of them stays to help me. She strode off in a huff, and I stared at her. What do you want to do, mate? Sharon said, uneasy, still looking at Dolores. I didn't blame her. An uncertain Dolores was putting me on edge as well. I need physical backup. You're coming with me. Moti, stay here and stay safe. Dolores, wait, I called, jogging after her. Just be careful, okay? I requested while unstrapping and handing Moti over to her. Moti's precious to me. I can understand that, she sniffed. I'll be sure to keep it safe. And only ask Moti a million questions, alright? I said dryly before turning back to join Sharon. Sharon had the car running, and ready by the time I got to her. I wasted no time jumping in the passenger seat. To be honest, I'm glad you decided to take me with you, she admitted, smiling as she turned the car around. Why, would you miss me that much? I joked, staring out the window to where Dolores waved goodbye with the hand she held Moti with. No, I hate to think of you driving around Moscow, she chuckled, winking at me. I laughed, elevating the mood for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about, I quipped. I'm an excellent driver. Sure, if you're driving a bumper car, she laughed. Rude, I sniffed. And to think, I was starting to grow fond of you. I was going to fight Vardik off, you know. Vardik, she said with a stern look and a twinkle in her eye, is his own worst enemy. He doesn't need your help. Everybody needs someone's help. That's what I've learned. We approached the hospital with caution. The more I saw of Moscow, the more I realized how much its government had collapsed. While other nations had tightened their rules, Russia seemed to have turned into a lawless state instead. On the short half-hour drive, I've seen several burning buildings. Aside from the looters, I'd not seen a single soul on the street. The sane ones must have stayed inside and locked their doors. All this because the sun went out a few times. The chaos, the complete alienation of everything we'd ever known before. Everything we knew was wrong, the astronaut had said. Looking around, I could agree with that. I've travelled more of the world since the first incident than I had in my entire life. And I realised I have no idea what the world was like before the sun went out. Things had changed drastically. How many people have died, I asked. Excuse me? Sharon asked, startled by the question. Since the sun first flickered out. Sharon's face grew grim, and she stared ahead without any emotion. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands maybe? Doesn't matter. How can you say that, I asked, aghast. More will die if we can't keep on track and fix what's wrong with our solar system, she said softly, swallowing. I sighed, knowing she was right to be analytical rather than emotional, though I didn't like it. Sharon had lost more than most. If we got bogged down with emotions like grief and guilt, we'd never make it. When the hospital came into view, I was surprised to see a familiar face loitering the streets in front of it. Satine. Sharon pulled up and I wound down my window. Are you alright? What happened? I'm fine, she slurred as she fell into the back seat of the car and laid down. You'll forgive me if I don't trust the locals right now. So you bust yourself out, huh? Sharon asked. Hell yeah, she laughed. Sharon carefully pulled away from the curb. They said some stuff in Russian, and I took it as my cue to leave, Satine added. Probably a good call. Are we heading back to the estate or another hotel? Neither, I said, turning to look at Satine. We moved shop after sabotage. Super, she muttered. What drugs did they have you on? I asked. All of them, she declared happily, closing her eyes. And she's out, Sharon giggled, looking in the rearview mirror. I nodded my head, turning the heater on in the back. It's probably best. Sleep heals all. No, it really doesn't. It doesn't hurt. Well, you ain't wrong there. I think we could all use about 10 years sleep after this. Getting back to the landing strip and getting Satine into a makeshift bed in the jet took around an hour. It was dark by the time it was done. I stepped outside to where Sharon was staring at the stars and looked up as well. I am assuming Moti was fine here? She asked, obviously reluctant to break the silence. Yeah, we did a few updates, fixed a few cameras. Moti honestly thinks that Dolores just didn't want to be alone. Sharon frowned. I couldn't blame her. Didn't sound like the Dolores I knew. Sharon looked at me, noting my naked wrist. Where's Moti? Plugged into my tablet to get all the information Moti missed out on while out of action, I said. We need to decipher Luca's message, and I'm not sure how to start. Sharon didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We were at the dead end if something didn't change. Vardik returned, near dawn the next day. While shoveling food into his mouth, we handed over the data he'd hacked. While the new data didn't add anything to the astronaut's audio message, it confirmed that it was authentic. Teacher, I'm unsure why everyone is confused. What do you mean, Moti? I asked, pushing around the eggs Dolores had served up. The message clearly states that everything we know is wrong. That's the exact problem, little calculator. Sharon snorted from where she was sitting next to Satine. What do we know? That the sun's been going out, Dolores mused, dropping fresh bread onto the table and sitting herself. That's all we know for sure. So that is wrong. If we use Boolean logic, that means the sun hasn't been going out. We all stopped eating. Moti remained silent, waiting for the penny to drop. Moti, what are you trying to say? I asked, throat dry. Teacher, it's simple. The sun hasn't been disappearing. The Earth has. What other meaning could the message have? Is there something else we don't know? Something else we know for certain, teacher? I thought hard, but nothing came to mind. My mouth opened like a stunned fish. Then it must be the sun not going out. I put my head in my hands and groaned. Just because a computer says so doesn't make it so, Vardik argued, shaking his head. But it is right, Dolores said, standing to pace around the table. I don't know how it's possible, but it's the only puzzle piece that fits. We need to confirm it, I stated, my words muffled. How on Earth are we going to confirm that the Earth is the problem? Are we sure there's no video with the recording? Oh, there's a video, Vardik said. We all turned to him at once. What? I started? Why didn't you? Because the recording got corrupted during transmission, Vardik interrupted. It's a miracle NASA managed to reconstruct the audio track at all. From what I can see, they pulled all the stops to reconstruct the video too. And they failed. Vardik shrugged. Unless we go to the source, we're not going to see the video. The source? The moon, Vardik said seriously. Literally. Your astronaut seems to have crashed there. Dolores cursed disappointedly. I sighed and shut my eyes. So we're out of options. There is one option, Sharon muttered, reaching out to touch my hand. I took hers in my own, grateful for the support. We go to the source, she said. To space. To the moon. To get uncorrupted recording and see it for ourselves. Now that's impossible, Vardik laughed, staring incredulously at Sharon. We're not astronauts. But I might know some we can send to space and get the recording, Satine said. The first word she'd uttered since waking. I might even know some who are already involved in the Russian space program. He all stared at her, disbelief still sinking in. Are we doing this? I asked Dolores. I looked at her as leader. Are we really going to try and do this? She stared back at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Yes, we are, she finally said. We have to. The question is, are we going to bring in Satine's Russians, or try to convince some of our American astronauts from back home to help us? There was a moment of silence as everyone turned to me. I blinked back at them. Me? My decision? I asked, panicked. You've got us this far, Sharon shrugged. I nodded, thinking it through. Yeah, we'll just use Satine's ones. Satine nodded. Consider it done, she said, standing. She was still a little unsteady on her feet, but she was doing well. Moti, contact the China team, I continued on a roll. Let them know what's happening and what we've decided to do. Yes, teacher. I'll contact Mr. Etienne and let him know that we're waiting for him. I took a deep breath, looking around the table. It took several moments before it really sank in. We were actually going to send astronauts to the moon to retrieve a video recording? A very important video recording. I nodded at everyone. I guess we're going to space. Arc 12 completed. Okay, we've been doing a lot of travel around the world, but now we're going to space apparently, so... Cool. Space it is. Teacher? Yes, Moti, I said, grabbing the last box of provisions from the jet. Dolores had organised food and new identities for us all. For the first time, I wondered how she did that. She wasn't connected to the company anymore. So how was she creating people and credit cards out of thin air? I could ask, but I doubt she'd tell me. Why does Miss Sharon no longer trust me? What are you talking about? When I complete tasks, she isn't always pleased. Does she think I'm not competent? She thinks you're too competent, I grumbled. Sharon and I had a discussion last night while Moti was on charge in the other room. My emoticon was different, special, but how or why we didn't know. You do things without being asked and go outside the parameters of your programming, I continued, shutting the door to the second car of our convoy. We were heading to I don't know how to say that. Vostochny? Cosmodrome? Oh my god, I can't pronounce that either. Near Tsiolvos... Oh my god. In a convoy of cars, Dolores would fly the plane over and meet us there. I thought it would make more sense for us to stick together in the air, but I've been outvoted on that count. People tend not to trust machines when they start taking over and turning into our robot overlords, I said, only half joking. Sharon got worried when Moti kept saying they want Dagger dead, and she was wondering if we should limit Moti's capabilities for the time being, at least until we understood what was going on. I disagreed. I liked Moti the way that we were. I don't plan to become an overlord, teacher. That's what all overlords say. If I were an overlord, I'd be kind. You would be my favourite pet. I stopped, staring at Moti incredulously. That was a joke. Please don't make jokes, I wheezed, holding back laughter. It gives me indigestion. Ready to roll? Frank appeared behind me and I nodded tiredly. He's been driving one car, Sharon the other. Basically, I answered him, looking around. Where's everyone else? I'm not their mother, I don't know, he said, checking the tyres on the car for the second time today. You're eager, I noted. You doing better today? Yes, I just want to get this done. Make sure whoever needs to be on that shuttle gets there, he snapped. However, a second later he shook his head sadly. No, that's not true. What's wrong, Crank? Something bugging you? He rubbed his neck apprehensively and tossed his phone into the front seat. I think Montague wants me to go on that shuttle, he admitted. I'd really rather not. I'm afraid of heights. He shook himself, mentally pushing it aside. He cleared his throat. You riding with me or your girlfriend? You and I are in the same car, I replied, ignoring the girlfriend comment. Dolores wanted it that way, and I'm reluctant to argue with her at this point. Sharon, Satine, and Vardic are in the other one. I'm sure he loved that, he muttered, walking away. Do you think Mr. Vardic is a threat? A threat? I asked, heading back to the hangar, which we'd made our makeshift home for the last couple of days. An opposition in the battle for Miss Sharon's heart. I stopped abruptly, laughing. Have you been watching romance movies again? 12 today, teacher. I was spared from answering by the sound of an engine high above our heads. Looking up, I saw a small plane come into view. Dolores, I yelled. Please tell them that you call for backup and this isn't a concern. She emerged from the hangar, gun in hand. It's not one of mine. I ran to the hangar and grabbed Vardic and Sharon. Get in the car. Get the engine running. If we need a quick getaway, you're it. She nodded and ran for the four-wheel drive we'd selected. As a small jet landed and began taxiing where we were, Crank emerged as well, with an automatic rifle in hand. I don't want anyone to die, I murmured to both him and Dolores. Dolores nodded unconvincingly. Crank said nothing. The plane stopped, and the stairs lowered. Tense, I waited for the shadowed figure to step forward. It was Etienne. Be cautious, hang back, I think. I held back my joy at seeing my friend. How'd he get here? How'd he even find us? Tintin, I called cautious. Was he a hostage? Welcome to Russia, right? He laughed, jumping down the steps and making his way toward me. Stay where you are, Dolores barked with her gun drawn, advancing with Crank until we were alongside the plane. Etienne looked at me confused. What are you doing here? I asked from behind the duo of guns. You called for us, he said, confused. We didn't, Dolores said darkly. Step away from the aircraft. What? Hang on, I got a message from you, Etienne said, stepping back. Crank moved to climb the stairs and search the plane. I haven't been able to contact you, I shook my head. I've been trying. Crank returned to the door with a stranger, a man in a suit. His hands were on his head in surrender, his eyes wild with fear. Apart from him, the plane's clear, Crank nodded to Dolores. Just the people from the China team. Hello, Mr. Etienne. I'm glad you got my message. Was the flight pleasant? Moti, explain now, I cried, looking up as Chase, a matron, also appeared from the plane. You said to let them know what was happening, teacher. I arranged for a private plane and a pilot to bring them here to help. Aren't I excellent? You need to tell me before you do these things. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. Right thing or not, warning and permission is needed. Where'd you get the money from? I siphoned some money from the company for emergencies before I was rejected access. It was more than enough to arrange 2 flights. 2? I asked, shaking Chase's hand and greeting and nodding to matron. I noticed that the rest of the Etherites went on the plane. Where are the others? Another plane's taken them, Etienne confirmed. Can you please stop pointing a gun at our pilot? I turned to Crank, who still had the pilot on his knees. The poor fellow had peed himself. He looked to Dolores as she nodded. As soon as Crank let the man up, he fainted, and Crank sighed. I'll deal with it, he muttered, picking him up. When he wakes, we'll be gone, and he can take his plane back. Tell them to change their flight plans, Moti. Find somewhere near Vostochny, so they can land and meet us. Yes, teacher. You'd better get everyone in the hangar, Dolores said, looking up at the morning sky. I don't like being out in the open like this. Soon we were all gathered in the hangar. Satine was still asleep, and we didn't wake her. The last few days without pain meds had been hard on her, and sleeping was probably the best thing for her. So you really plan to go into space? Etienne asked, rubbing his neck. Alright, well, I guess we'll wrap this one up here. Now, seeing we've done all of Earth, it's time to go to the moon, because we've travelled everywhere on Earth pretty much. Over the past 12, 13 arcs or whatever. Who knows what's after the moon? Perhaps we're getting close to the end. I don't really know. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.